once you've installed the FMOD package, you can add sounds to game objects via the FMOD Studio event emitter. So here we get an drop-down menu for how we want to trigger the sounds, and then we have an event reference here so we can get the events, which is great. But this also means that the sound is attached to the game object, and although we can combine them via arrays, sometimes you want to have a controller script where the codes to trigger the events are. So let's create a logic which triggers the sound from the object, and then a controller script where we can assign the event and we can change events when we want to. So let's start by looking at how we play a sound from an object. So I'm going to create a script here and I'm going to call it play sound. And for this one, I'm going to use an on-trigger event. So I'm going to get rid of the initial methods here. On-trigger enter will trigger if a collider other, which is the local variable, and then we'll use that variable, compare the tag, and then if that is the player, then sound will play. So to make the sound play, we need to call FMOD. So we can do FMOD Unity, and then runtime manager, and then play one shot. And then we would need the path to this event. So I'm going to get a colon here, and I'm going to jump back to FMOD. I'm going to copy the path, copy path, go back to our script, and then paste that in here. Let's save that. And then in Unity, we're going to make sure that our cube is set as a trigger, because we want to do the on-trigger event. Press play. And then we have the sound. But we can simplify the script and make it a bit more accessible by taking the namespace here and adding this library in the beginning of our script. So using FMOD Unity, and now you can see they're grayed out, so I don't need FMOD Unity anytime that I'm going to be using the runtime manager. So for instance, let's say that in this case I wanted to use the runtime manager and I wanted to get a bus, which is the mixer, and now instead of having to add FMOD Unity in front of this all the time, I can just do runtime manager. We can also get access to the different events by using an event reference. So in the beginning of the script here, I'm going to add a variable, which is going to be an event reference. So event reference, like this. And I'm just going to call this event reference. And I'm going to set this as public so we can get access to it outside of this script and in the inspector. And then I'm going to take event reference here, which is our variable. And I'm going to go and take away the string here, which is the path. And I'm going to add event reference like this. So if we now grab our event sound here from the list, and then we can see that we have access to all of the sounds in our FMOD session. Get event sound, press play, and then run into the cube. By definition, a one-shot sound will trigger and then it'll play the duration of the sound. But if we instead have a loop, we want to be able to play and then stop. So to do this, I'm going to add an event instance. But to do this, we need an additional library. So I'm going to go to using, which is the namespace and the library. And I'm going to go FMOD and then FMOD Studio. And now I can go event instance. And let's call that loop event, like that. And then we need to make some changes in our if statement here. So let's get rid of this and then go loop event, and loop event equals runtime manager dot create instance. That's the instance of the event that we want to create. And then we need a path for this. In this case, we can use our event reference. We can still use that as a path. And then we can go loop event, and as this is now an event, we can simply go start. And this start method is now taking advantage of this library here. So let's save this. And then we're going to change our event sound here, and we're going to get the event loop instead. And press play. And now this will play until we stop it. So I'm going to go back into our code and I'm going to copy this whole thing. Let's tidy this up a little bit. I'm going to copy our on trigger enter and paste it and change our enter to exit. We've already created our event, so we just need to stop it. Let's get rid of the start, add stop instead. And if we add the parentheses here, we're going to get some options here, and let's do just stop mode immediate. Go back to Unity, press play. So as long as we're inside the cube, then the sound will play, and when we exit the cube, exit the trigger, it'll stop. But we might have lots of different game objects, so instead of adding each sound to each individual game object, we can control them from a controller script or a manager script. In this case, I added a game object here, and I'm going to add a script, a new script. Let's call this FMOD controller. So now what we want to happen is that when the player enters the object, we want that to trigger the event. And then when it exits, we want it to stop it. So I'm going to get rid of these methods here. And so other scripts can get hold of our stop and start method here. We're going to make them public. Public void start event. And then we can do a public void stop event. And then we can simply copy the FMOD coding from the play sound script. And then in our play sound event, we can get hold of a reference to that script. Let's go public and then FMOD controller and FMOD controller. And in our on trigger, we'll do FMOD controller dot start event. And in our stop, of course, we'll just take the same thing. We'll just change that to stop. So stop. And then we go back to Unity. And then in our cubes here, we need to add our script. So I'm going to select all of them. And I'm going to go to FMOD controller and add that. And because I selected all of them, then we see that they all have the script. And then press play. And maybe the most obvious benefit of this is that I can now go to my FMOD controller and I can change the sound. And now all these cubes will play the new sound without me having to change it individually for each game object. If we want the sound to be in 3D, we need to add a 3D spatializer in FMOD. So I'll go to the event, add effect, add spatializer, save and build that. And then we need to make some changes to the script. So normally when you're adding a 3D spatialization in the script, you will do so loop event here, set 3D attributes, and then runtime utils, 3D attributes. And if the script was attached to the game object that we wanted to be spatialized, we would add game object to reference that. However, we want the position of the cube to be referenced in our FMOD controller script. So one way we can do this is to take this local variable other, and we can take the game object property of that. So other.gameObject. And then we'll get an error here because the receiving method doesn't have the same information. So we can then add the information that we're getting from the sending script here. And in this case, that's game object. And let's call this pos for position. And then instead of adding game object here, which would reference the game object which this script is attached to, we're now taking the position from the game object that we're calling the script from. And we're calling this position here. Now we don't have any errors anywhere. And you can see I've commented out the stop event here so we can walk away from our game object and actually hear the 3D specialization.